Hi everyone, this is Jill. This video is going to be about setting up a simple Node server like in the last video, but on the back end of my React app that I was building, and then configuring the React app to make Ajax calls across to the server on the back end. Okay, so since the last time you saw this React project, I've made a couple of changes that I'm going to just walk you through. So I made a server file and just added a server.js. I made a server folder and added a server.js file into it. This is pretty much exactly the same as the server file that I wrote in the last video that I recorded, which was walking you through setting up a Node server. There are a couple of little changes just to configure it to work properly with React. So first of all, I still have my two routes where I'm requiring, where I'm receiving an HTTP request and I'm sending back an HTML file or a JSON object. But in this case, because I have my server.js file inside a server folder, which is here, and my HTML file is inside the client folder here, I've had to use this path.join code just so that I can pass res.send file the absolute file path for this React test HTML file. So I had to require the path module. You don't have to install anything for that, it's already inbuilt. And then I just use this path.join in order to get the right path name for the directory and for the file that I'm looking for. The JSON route is basically exactly the same as it was. The only difference is that this time, instead of hitting that route and getting the JSON object in the browser, what I'm going to do is insert a button into my HTML, which then you can click and it will call this route and get the JSON object back, and then we can display it in the page as well. So finally, the only thing that I had to do differently with my Node server for this app was just to set this server up to host static files, so basically to host my React code as well as my HTML. So you say app.use/static. What this does is it creates a route on your app called /static, which is hosting the files that are in this dist folder. And the dist folder over here is where I am storing my compiled and bundled React code that I showed you how to compile it and bundle it in my Webpack and Babel walkthrough. So originally, if I go back to my HTML file, I had the script tag here and I was requiring that, that bundled code directly from the dist folder here. But now, because I've set up this static URL and I'm hosting my bundled code on there from the dist file, all I have to do is require the file directly from that static URL just in my HTML code. Okay, so I mentioned that I wanted to add a button to my HTML through React. So originally my React app literally just had hello and then the person's name. So in this case it has my name. And that's all I was rendering in my code. So this time I have made a new React component for the button that I want to make. If I go back to this util.js file, I don't mean to jump around a lot, but I just need to explain this. Okay, so this was the function originally that was formatting the name to display on the page. I walked through that in, I think, my first video walkthrough. So I've added this new function now, which is called getJSON. And literally all it does is it hits that /JSON route and it gets the JSON object back again. And it's using this module called fetch, or an API called fetch. It's inbuilt and it works on newer browsers. What it does is it just makes an Ajax request from React or any JavaScript library on the front end across to your server on the back end. So you can just call it like this, fetch, and call the function normally with brackets. and I'm passing in the route that I want it to hit, so /JSON, and it's giving me back a promise. And what that means is it's saying, I promise you I will give you some data when I get it back. So you use the .then function to basically say, okay, so when you've hit this /JSON route and you've got your data back, then I want to pass it to this anonymous function here. So I'm passing the response in, which is the response that you get from this /JSON route, into this function. And what that's doing is just returning response.json. So I'm just getting my JSON object back from the response body, or the response object that is returned from hitting that /JSON route. Okay, so where that ties in is in this button class. So I've made this new button React component. Down here you can see what the class actually renders, which is a div that contains a button that says click me for data. And then something called a pre, which is for pre-formatted text. It's just an HTML tag that allows your text, if it's already formatted, to keep the same structure as it had before. And that's where I want to display my JSON object when I get it back. So what I want to do is when we click this button, I want to say on click, I'm going to pass it this handle click function. So handle click in turn calls getJSON, and getJSON was this function from this file here, which calls the /JSON route. One thing you do have to do is you have to pass or import getJSON up at the top of the file, or whatever your function name is going to be from the other file. Otherwise you won't be able to use the function in your React component. Okay, so I have the handle click function here. Again, it's working on promises, so it calls the getJSON function, which is calling the /JSON route, and it says then when you get the data back, I want to pass that response onto this anonymous function, which is setting the state of the button component. And so this .state in React is an object. You have to instantiate it as an empty object up here, so that's what this constructor class does. You have to call this super function first, which calls the constructor method on the original parent class, which in this case is the React component class itself, and then that allows you to use this .state. So it lets you store things in this .state inside an object, so you just have to make a key and then you can set the value to whatever you want. So in this case, I'm setting the value to response, which if we go back to getJSON is equal to the response.json object that we got back from the /JSON route. And then to do with the way that the keyword this works in JavaScript, we have to do a little bit of binding. And I'm going to explain that in another video. In my next video, I'm going to talk about this in JavaScript and how it works and how bind and call and apply and different functions like that work. But for now, we just need to say that we need to bind this in the getJSON function. And we also need to bind this down here when we originally called the handle click function when we click the button. Okay, so from there, once we've got the response back, we've clicked the button, you get your JSON back, and then we just stringify the JSON and then pass it into the HTML, so it should display on the page. Okay, so all we need to do from here is, if I just clear my terminal so it's not so confusing, all we need to do is recompile our code. If you make any changes, you have to always recompile your code. And then just restart your server again. So if I go back to my web page here, if I reload the page, I get my JSON object here with my name in from the first walkthrough that I gave. And then my button, click me for data. And if I click this button, it gives me my JSON object down at the bottom here. And I just wanted to show you this network tab as well. If you go to, on Chrome, if you right click, go to inspect element and go to the network tab, you can see all of your HTTP requests that are going through down here. So you can see the JSON request that happened when you click the button, and you've got your GET request, and it's going through fetch, and it's giving me back my JSON object. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, and thank you for watching. Bye.